Well, I don't know about you, but I know Friday's my favorite day of the week. I guess everybody likes Fridays. It doesn't necessarily make me unique. But I like Fridays a lot because it means it's time for the Morning Pitt Mailbag, where I take questions from all the fans and the Pitt fans and the readers on Panther-Lair.com, and I answer as many as I can here during our Friday edition of the Morning Pitt. I always look forward to these mailbags. It's always fun to let you guys think of the topics and not me. So let's jump into it. The Morning Pitt Mailbag right here on YouTube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Yeah, it's Friday. It's the Morning Pit. It's youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, and it's the mailbag. You know the deal. You know what we always ask you to do. Like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, so you don't miss any of our Pit video content. Morning Pit videos every day of the week, Monday through Friday. Live Panther-Lair show that we do every Wednesday night at 8:30 p.m. with me and Jim Hammett. The post-game show that we do after every game. We'll have one on Saturday after the Wake Forest game, hopefully starting around 7:30, somewhere around there. We'll talk for an hour or more. We'll have some drinks. We'll talk about the game. And we'll do it live right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. You want to make sure you don't miss that. Or if you want to make sure you don't miss that, subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, and then you'll get a notification, and you can turn on notifications, and you'll get an alert sent to your phone so you know when we go live and you don't miss any of the live stream. It's always something to look forward to. It's always fun. I really like doing the mailbags and on Friday, and I really enjoy doing the post-game shows. It's fun to just sit down right after the game, particularly these road games. You know, a home game, I'm going to end up you do post-game press conferences. It takes a while to get home and get back to the Panther-Lair studios and start the post-game show. Road games, man, it's just a couple minutes after the game ends. I just pretty much got to get this set up, and boom, we are live, and we're jumping into it with instant reactions and immediate, thoughts on the game, and I always look forward to it. So make sure you tune in for that right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, and that way you will, you can be part of the live show. It's a lot of fun. For sure. And of course, you might be admiring my super sweet Rainbow Warrior sweatshirt. You might be saying to yourself, Chris, where did you get that incredible Hawaii Rainbow Warrior sweatshirt? You know the answer. It's Homefield. Homefieldapparel.com. It's the best place you're going to get college gear. They've got great Pitt stuff. They've got great Hawaii stuff. They got stuff for schools, 150 schools across the country, probably more by now. They've got a great homecoming collection that's out right now. And with the Pitt stuff, I mean, I'm wearing this sweet Rainbow Warrior sweatshirt, which I know you're going to want. But the Pitt stuff is outstanding. It's just a classic look. I don't want to say vintage because it makes it sound old. It's a classic, instantly recognizable look. You see it and you're like, that is Pitt. That's historic Pitt, and that looks incredible. And it is. It's some of the coolest Pitt stuff you're going to find. T-shirts, sweatshirts, joggers, bomber jackets, dad hats, all kinds of things at homefieldapparel.com. And you know the best part of it, of course. If you go there now, you use the promo code LAIR23, LAIR23, you get 15% off your first order. You can't beat that. Some of the best Pitt stuff you're going to own, and you get it for 15% off. LAIR23, LAIR23 is the promo code. You use it at homefieldapparel.com. Let's jump into the questions here, the mailbag. We always take these questions on the Between Fifth and Forbes message board at Panther-Lair.com. And the first question comes from mailbag regular Smenges. And Smenges asks, what's your outlook for the running game, including the offensive line, versus Wake Forest in the rest of the season? At first, when I first read this question, Smenges, I thought you were just asking, like, do I think they'll be able to run the ball well against Wake Forest? But I realized that you're kind of asking a little bit more about who do I think is going to play, what is the offensive line going to look like, and that whole thing. I mean, I think, and I talked about this a bit yesterday on the Morning Pit. I've talked about it throughout the week. I mean, I think Rodney Hammond's still the number one back. And I think that's how the coaches view it. I think that's how they should view it. I think he's the most talented back on the roster. And I think they're going to try and get him the most work. But I also think he's dealing with a nagging injury. And this is my own, I'm not stating that as fact. That's my own sort of guess, knowing that, he was a little bit slowed down in training camp. The coaches have said as much. And so maybe they were trying to protect him a little bit, trying to keep him healthy. At some point, I mean, you're going to have to rely on him. He's your number one back. And if you want to establish the running game, it's going to be through him. Now, I like Sebo Flemister. I think Sebo Flemister is a good player. I am, I think few people feel as positively about Thibaut Flemisher as I do. I think generally the view is that he's a mediocre or average back or worse. I think he's better than that. I think he can be good. I think he can be solid and help establish the running game. But Rodney Hammond is still your guy. He's the number one guy, and he needs to be treated as such, and he needs to perform as such. With the offensive line, the question is really going to come down to whether or not Jake Cradle comes back this week. I think Branson Taylor and Ryan Baer are locked in as your starters at tackle. The interior is all sort of up in the air based on Cradle's status and, quite frankly, Blake Zabovic's status. If it's me, not only are the two tackles, Taylor and Baer, locked in, but also the center, Terrence Moore, is locked in. If it's me, I'm sticking with those three, and then I'll decide on the two guard spots depending on what I have available from Jake Cradle and Blake Zabovic. If I have both available, then those two guys go into the guard spots. If I have only one available, then I pick from BJ Williams and Jason Collier of which one of those guys I want to start on which side and put Cradle or Zabovic, whoever's available, on the other side. If it was me, that's what I would do. It's not me, so I don't know what Dave Borbely's going to do. I do think he wants to keep Terrence Moore at center. I think he wants to keep him out there and let him keep playing. So even if Jake Cradle comes back or if Cradle and Zabovic come back, I think you could see those guys both lining up at guard and keeping Moore at center. But I mean, we'll see. We won't know until it happens. As far as Wake Forest run defense, they're middle of the pack in terms of rushing yards per game allowed. In the ACC, they've given up the second fewest rushing touchdowns. But what's interesting is when you look at Wake Forest's schedule, they opened with Elon, Vanderbilt, and Old Dominion. That's when they went on a 3-game winning streak to open the year, although Old Dominion was a close one. They only won by 3, and I think they were starting to show some of the warts, and not looking as good as they looked against Elon and Vanderbilt. In the last 3 games where they've lost, Georgia Tech, Clemson, and Virginia Tech, you've really seen the rushing numbers go up. Those 3 teams have rushed for 506 yards on 110 carries. It's 4.6 yards per carry out of those 3 teams, Georgia Tech, Clemson, Virginia Tech, and they've given up 4 rushing touchdowns in those 3 games. And so Wake Forest rush defense numbers not bad on the season, but in ACC play, those numbers look a bit worse. And I think as the level of competition has gone up, they've shown some weaknesses against the run. Georgia Tech, 158 yards and a touchdown on 32 carries. It's 4.9 yards per carry. Clemson, 207 and 2 scores on 42 carries. It's 4.9 yards per carry. Virginia Tech just under the 4 yards per carry mark at 3.9, but they got a rushing touchdown. So 5 rushing touchdowns allowed this season, 4 in the last 3 games. Wake Forest rushing defense has been effective on the whole this year, but not so much when they've gone against ACC teams. And so it could be an opportunity for Pitt to get something going. I think this is an interesting question here, sort of along those lines. STR61166 asks, any concern for Christian making his first road start? Wake isn't exactly the most intimidating environment, but I don't think he's ever had any snaps in a road game. Hoping he can outplay Griffiths for Wake, who has been very iffy lately. Well, Wake Forest quarterback situation is, it's not as bad as Pitt's situation if you look at the whole, but right now it might be worse because Wake Forest finally benched their quarterback in last week's game, the game against Virginia Tech. Bench Mitch Griffiths for Kern, and Kern got hurt. And so they had to go back to the starter, but then Griffiths even got hurt a little bit. So, they're down to like their third string quarterback. I don't know what options they're going to have. I think the quarterback situation is going to be really dicey for Wake Forest when they take the field on Saturday. And I don't even know if I think they've got some ideas and some contingency plans, but I don't really know what their plan is at quarterback. They could be in a pretty ugly spot. Christian Bear has played in a couple games away from home. He played in the Outback Bowl in 2021, the loss to Arkansas. He played like a half dozen snaps that day. I think he maybe attempted 1 pass. He played in the game at Auburn last year for Penn State, the game that Penn State won. I think he took 5 snaps at the end of the game, threw 1 pass, maybe he had 1 rushing attempt or something like that. So, the negligible amount of stats. You're right. This is his first real playing time on the road. Fortunately for him, I guess, it just so happens to be at a place that's not going to have a very intimidating environment. This is, Wake Forest is not known for its home field advantage. This is not going to be a game where it's at night. I mean, the Virginia Tech game, Virginia Tech was 1-3 or whatever it was going into that game. So, I mean, they were in a bad way, but it was a night game and they filled it up because they have a great fan base and they drew a great crowd. Wake Forest is not that kind of situation, and it's a 3:30 game. You're not going to, you don't have any sort of external factors boosting the attendance for that one. So that shouldn't be a huge factor. I thought it was, and a few other people have pointed this out, and I thought it was one of the sort of unspoken positives from the game against Louisville last week, or quieter positives from the game against Louisville last week, is that the offensive line didn't have any false starts in that game. And I think a lot of times when you have a new starter at quarterback, different cadence, different way of calling the offense, you're just putting yourself in a position where you could have some of those sort of procedural issues, those unforced errors, but just sort of procedural issues that come with changing quarterbacks and having a different voice back there. But that didn't happen. They had one false start in the game against Louisville, and that was Dejon Reynolds. It wasn't even an offensive lineman. So we'll see how he handles the crowd environment, and we'll see how he handles the road environment, I should say, and the atmosphere. The bigger challenge will be in a couple weeks when they go to Notre Dame, or next week, I guess it is. We'll see. I don't want to write it off as a possibly difficult place to play, but Wake Forest doesn't really have that reputation. Let's see. OH Pete, I'm assuming Ohio Pete, says, is there any info coming out of the South Side regarding Pat Narduzzi's opinion on Frank Cignetti's job performance? No. I don't have sources telling me that Narduzzi is, tearing walls down and he can't wait to fire Cignetti. I don't have sources saying that. But what I do have is some knowledge of Pat Narduzzi, how he thinks, how he operates, what he's done over the last 8 years. And I mean, certainly he's unpredictable at times. But he looks and sees the same thing that you and I look and see. He looks at the performance of the offense last year, the performance of the offense through 6 games this year. He looks at the quarterback decisions that have been made, particularly this year. And I think when it's all said and done, if a change is made, we're going to, it'll have more to do with the quarterback decisions this year than the quarterback decisions last year. But I think he looks at the totality of it all and he sees what you see. He sees what I see. You don't think it's very good, and I know it's not very good. I don't think Pat Narduzzi's looking at this offense and saying, boy, things are going really well right now. I don't need sources to make that guess. Pitman 2003 says, is Sean Fitzsimmons hurt? What is keeping Elliott Donald from breaking through? Yeah, Fitzsimmons has been dealing with an injury. It's really kind of limited his playing time all season, really. I want to bring up his participation here and see where he's at, because he has not played a lot. He has been limited. He's missed a lot of time. Let's see. Yeah, Fitzsimmons has played in 2 games so far. He played in the West Virginia game and he played in the Virginia Tech game. And I think he had minimal participation in those games. The wrong game. West Virginia, he played 1 snap. Virginia Tech, he played 13 snaps. So we're talking about defense here. He has been hurt. He's been dealing with an injury. I don't think he's being kept off the field due to play or performance. I think he's being kept off the field because he's been hurt and dealing with a nagging injury. And I think that's been a blow to what they expected from the defensive line and the defensive tackles this season. I think they expected that group to produce more than it has. And I think he was part of the reason. I think he was part of the expectation, was that sort of like you're seeing with some of the other young players on defense, that he might not make a big impact right off the bat, but as he settled in and by the time he got to midseason, he would start doing a little more, making a bigger impact. Sam Okunlola is a great example, I think, of the trajectory they expected Sean Fitzsimmons to be on, but he hasn't been able to get on the field. He's been hurt. And so that, I think, has held him back. Elliott Donald hasn't been hurt. To my knowledge, he hasn't been hurt. He's just not getting on the field. He's just not playing, and he's not making an impact. I'm going to bring up his stat numbers here, or his snaps, I should say, on defense. He's played in 3 games. He played 7 snaps against Wofford, 11 against North Carolina, and 7 against Virginia Tech. On defense, I'm talking about. It's not exactly a ringing endorsement because he's been available and he hasn't been playing. SV Pig 1 says, do you see Pitt pursuing fewer recruits to round out the class and focusing more on the portal? Could use some veteran cornerbacks, D-line, and O-line depth. I don't think they're going to back off recruits thinking, hey, we'll save spots for the portal. I think to some extent, some of those spots that you're going to get for the portal will come from guys who leave your team. And there's some of that already factored into the size of the recruiting class and the guys that they're going to take. But I think that's where you're going to find some of that room is the guys who leave to the transfer portal, or other guys who leave with eligibility remaining. I think that's where you're going to find room for those transfers. I think they're continuing to go after recruits. You do have to account for decommitments. There's going to be some of that. You probably can. I mean, I would assume you can expect a couple more. Not like I have some inside info or I'm winking about it. It's just probably what's going to happen. It's sort of part of the deal nowadays. So you'll have some of that, and you'll need some guys who can step in and fill those spots in the recruiting class. But then, as far as the spots on the roster, I think you'll have attrition. You'll have transfers who leave, and that's going to give you room to go get corners, go get to go get a corner, to go get a pass rush guy, an edge rusher, to go potentially get some offensive linemen if you need that. And get a quarterback if you need it. And maybe not. Maybe you won't need a quarterback. We talked about this a lot last week about how they would find out over the next few games whether they need a quarterback. And I think Christian Bayer's first start was encouraging enough that you can at least set that to the side for now. You're not going to completely, erase it or forget about it, but you can table the discussion for the time being about getting a transfer quarterback. 121 Rum says, how much did the win Saturday recalibrate your expectations for the rest of the season? That's a good question. And it's something I've thought a lot about this week because, and Jim and I talked about it on Wednesday night on the live show. We talked about how many more wins can they get? They got 6 games left. They got some teams out here that, Wake Forest is 0-3 in ACC play. Syracuse is 0-3 in ACC play. Boston College is 1-2 in ACC play. Duke is 2-0. But 4 of their next 6 games are on the road. 3 of those 4 are against Florida State, Louisville, and North Carolina of road games. So Duke is 2-0 now, but 5 games from now, Duke could have 3 losses, 4 losses. The Blue Devils could be 4-4 or 4-3 or something like that, 3-4, heading into the Pitt game at the end of the season. So my point is that there are winnable games out there. By and large, I'm about where I was heading into the Virginia Tech game. All right, heading into the Virginia Tech game, I still had a sliver of hope that Phil Jurkovec could be effective, average, average enough to win some games, to win against teams like Virginia Tech, Wake Forest, Syracuse, Boston College. And then they lost that game, and I said, okay, if they don't change quarterbacks, I'm not sure how many more games they can win on this schedule. They'll luck into 1 or 2, but I don't know how many more they're really going to get. Then they made the change to Veer. The passing game looked a little bit different, had a little bit more success, a little bit more effectiveness, not consistent throughout the whole game, but a little bit more success. And you start to think, okay, well, so Virginia Tech was one they let get away when you talk about ACC games. They kind of made up for it with Louisville, a game that you probably didn't think they were going to win. And so as you sit there now, at whatever 1-2 in the ACC with 5 games left to play, right? 5 conference games left, yeah. Now you're kind of thinking that again. You're like, okay, if you can just play average, you can just get average to above, even just slightly above average quarterback play. Yeah, they can beat Wake Forest. They should beat Wake Forest. Yeah, they can beat Syracuse. They should beat Syracuse. Yeah, they can beat Boston College. They should beat Boston College. And then you're looking at Duke, who knows what they're going to be and when Riley Leonard's going to get back and what they're going to be until he returns and when he returns. And then you're like, well, sure could give yourself some insurance if you could steal one of those big games, Notre Dame and Florida State, but not without even getting to that level. there's a path to 6 wins. Are they going to pull it off? Jim said it on Wednesday night. It's tough to say, yeah, they're going to pull it off, because it's hard not to imagine a slip up somewhere along the way. You know what I mean? That it's probably something will happen. Something will go wrong. But I guess my expectations right now are that they seem to have found a quarterback who can maybe put a little bit of a spark into the passing game. Defense continues to round into form. That'll be an ongoing process, and I think they are sort of steadily getting better. And as long as those two things are the case, that they've got a quarterback who can put a little bit of a spark into the passing game, and the defense can keep getting a little better, they can win some of these games. And so my expectations for the rest of the season is you keep pushing towards 6 wins. And that's a far cry from what we were expecting at the beginning of the year, but it doesn't matter anymore what the preseason expectations were. The expectations right now are that you keep pushing for 6 wins, and we'll see if they get there. Try and get a few other questions in here. This question, Panther Hog 1 says, can't believe I'm taking this question. Will Pitt build an on-campus stadium in your lifetime? No details, no other thoughts on who, what, when, or why, just yes or no. Yes. Alan McMurray says, thoughts on the running back room upcoming. Jules Goff and Yassine Willis, this year's recruits. Lloyd from last year, plus Harvison. He doesn't mention him. I think Goff can be the better of the two. Always nice to pluck a kid or two from prime Penn State territory. I'm not worried about the running back room. I'm really not. Sebo Flemister's done after this year. Whether or not Rodney Hammond comes back, I don't know if he will. At the beginning of the season, I would have said he's definitely not coming back. Now, with the low production and the limited playing time, I think maybe there's a possibility he could come back. But even beyond that, I like Derek Davis's potential. I like Montrevious Lloyd's potential. TJ Harvison got a lot of rave reviews in the spring. Jules Goff and Yassine Willis, like you mentioned, in this 2024 recruiting class. I mean, there's good players. I'm not worried about the running back room at all. I think those guys are going to be good. You know what I mean? I think they're going to be good. I think it'll be fine. You got to block for them. You got to get effective quarterback play. But I think the running backs will be fine. All right, one more. Let's see. Trying to find a good one to go out on here. Jay Lazinger, we'll take this one. Probably an impossible question to answer, but do you think we are going to see some fairly successful portal recruiting for wide receiver if Veer keeps up what we saw this past week? It is an impossible question. But if you go over the next 6 games and Veer keeps making some big throws, some deep throws, shows a little excitement in the game, something you can put on a little sizzle reel to show to potential transfer targets and that kind of thing. Yeah, I think you can have it'll be an easier sell than it was probably this offseason, as evidenced by the lack of success. They brought in one guy, Dejon Reynolds, and they tried for a bunch of them, and that was the only one that they could pull in. And, you have a change at quarterback, you have a passing game that may or may not be all that explosive. Yeah, I think that's a bit of a tough sell. If Veer over the next 6 games can make more of those big passes that he made against Louisville, then with him coming back then for another year or two, then I think it becomes a little bit of an easier sell. And then you have to get, then there's all the other elements that go into recruiting transfers, but I do think that's definitely something that would work in your favor. So I don't know if it's going to guarantee them any guys. I don't know if it's, they're definitely going to get some big time playmakers, but it should give you a chance. Now, it'll be interesting to see how strongly they go after wide receivers in the portal, based on who comes back. I mean, I think the freshmen are going to be really good. Kanate Mumfield, does he come back another year? Bub Means could come back another year. Dejon Reynolds can come back another year. I don't see Kanate. I mean, is Kanate Mumfield going to go to the NFL after this year? He's already transferred once, so I guess he could go somewhere else as a grad transfer. But I think you have the chance to have a pretty good wide receiving core next year with most of these guys back, and then, need to get something out of the recruits. But it'll be interesting to see if they go after them in the portal, go after guys in the portal. All right. I think that should about do it here on today's show, and do it for the week. It's been a lot of fun this week. We appreciate everybody who tunes in for these Morning Pitt videos. Don't forget the live show tomorrow night, the post-game show after Pitt Wake Forest comes to an end. That should be an interesting game and should be a fun post-game show. We'll have a lot of fun with that here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. So like this video and subscribe so you don't miss any of our Pitt video content, and then go over to homefieldapparel.com. Promo code LAIR23, LAIR23, so you can get it all. You can get 15% off your first order. Homefieldapparel.com. Thanks so much for tuning in this week. It's been a lot of fun. I really do appreciate it. Have a great rest of your day. Enjoy your Friday. Enjoy your Saturday. We will talk to you tomorrow after the game right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.